Chapter 121, Heaven and Earth are vast. Her birthday, Zhang Sha actually said that she remembered it. Zhang Xuning only felt that it was the most peaceful time for the two of them in the previous life, and this person had never been so kind to herself, and after being stunned for a moment, she felt some irrepressible joy in her heart. However, in the blink of an eye, his eyebrows and eyes slowly lowered again. It is not advisable for the heavenly sect to stay here for too long, and as soon as things are cleaned up, they will leave with everyone. There are not many horses. But Zhang Sha has basically gained the trust of the heavenly sect, and said that he represents the people of Dujun Mountain, and he does not dare to slack off at all, and he also makes people give him a horse. Xiao Dingfei rode a horse when he came. At this moment, he sat on the horse and stretched out his palm to Zhang Xuning, and said with a somewhat flirtatious smile, "It's a long way to Tongzhou, and the girl is such a delicate person, so let me take a ride." He invited her to ride with her. Zhang Xuning knew that this person was a disciple who only looked at people's faces, and he was suddenly not in a very good mood at the moment, so he glanced at him and was too lazy to take care of it. Xiao Dingfei raised his eyebrows. "Do you want to ride with your brother?" Zhang Xuning was embarrassed. "What are you doing?" Only these 4 words reveal a little edges and corners, and there is no delicate feeling given by the facial features of the previous girl. However, Xiao Dingfei was born with a cheap bone. The more flowers in the thorn bushes, the more he could give birth to a little eagerness to try, and he was not discouraged at all when he heard the words, but instead cast his eyes with a bit of banter and scrutiny to Zhang Sha, who was leading the horse not far away. "Zhang Sha." He didn't speak, he just lowered his eyes to the saddle. After a long while, when everyone was about to leave, he stretched out his hand to Zhang Xuning, rolled his Adam's apple slightly, and seemed to hesitate for a moment before he said slowly, "Get on the horse." Xiao Dingfei is not wrong. The road to Tongzhou is not close, although it will be possible to reach the town soon, but there is no carriage. Zhang Xuning is a young lady in the boudoir. Do you want her to hike? Although there are many disagreements with etiquette, I have to act cheaply. Zhang Xuning smiled lightly when she saw this, handed over her hand, and was helped on the horse by Zhang Sha, raising her eyes to meet Xiao Dingfei's not very pleasant gaze, so she deliberately returned a provocative look. Xiao Dingfei has always had a set of coaxing women, not to mention that he is invincible in the Qinlichu pavilion with this skin, and he has never seen such a person who does not give him face. Looking at this cover again, her face is pale and she can't see the slightest emotion. She looks like a judge of the dead in the palace of Hades. Which normal girl's family likes such a person? The more I think about it, the more angry it becomes. He gritted his teeth slightly, and only hummed a yin and yang weird sound from his nose. Humph, brother and sister. But in the end, there was no more sarcasm. Xiao Dingfei just looked at Zhang Sha's seemingly unfluctuating face and smiled, flicked his whip, and regardless of others, he galloped up the mountain road outside the dilapidated temple first. Everyone else is lagging behind him. At this time, Zhang Sha turned over and got on the horse. He sat behind Zhang Xuning, and when he held the saddle in front of him with both hands, he seemed to naturally hold her in his arms. The crisp aura that belonged to him easily surrounded her. Zhang Xuning's body was a little stiff, and she couldn't see the expression of Zhang Sha behind her. She could only see the pair of hands in front of her, which were not particularly good looking. The fingers are very long and the bones are distinct, and people can't help but think that the owner of these hands is by no means a pampered person, and he should have suffered hardships. She did not dare to lean back against her, and only grabbed the edge of the saddle in front of her with a slight force. The horses went ahead and followed the crowd. In winter, there is a cold silence in the mountains. Wilderness all around. There was not the sound of birds, only the sound of the wind whistling past and the sound of horses' hooves trampling on the slush ground. Riding with Zhang Sha, it is a completely different feeling from Yan Lin. The young man was blazing and proud. He had practiced martial arts since he was a child, and he was bent on galloping on the wide long road of the capital, as if nothing could stop him in front of him, and those who quickly crossed her line of sight were all prosperous worlds. The man behind him was restrained and silent. The winding mountain road was rugged and dangerous, and he could not see the end of the sky at a glance on this horse. The wind and snow covered the green trees and grass to lose their color, and in the cold wind blowing on the face, only the embracement behind him seemed to be hugging and revealing a faint warmth. Jiang Xuaning's mood slowly calmed down. Jiang Sha behind him also couldn't see her expression. However, she felt unusually quiet. That posture of silently staring ahead reminded him of the situation and demeanor on the night of her birthday in the previous life, so he finally remembered the rumors about her life in the capital in the previous life. Originally, she was the daughter of Zhang Boyu's wife Meng, but on the day she was born, she was secretly swapped with her daughter by the concubine who had a grudge against Meng in the back house, and was expelled to the grange with the concubine by mistake, and was raised by him for 14 years. Many people say that her sharp and tricky temper that is incompatible with the lady is that the concubine has been badly taught. Originally, not many people knew about it. Even Zhang Fu said to the outside world that she was just in a bad life, and she had to be fostered outside for 14 years to eliminate the disaster. Unexpectedly, after she became the queen, all kinds of rumors about her life experience, somehow, spread all over the streets and alleys in the capital. So, what does Jiang Xuaning think of on his birthday? Compared to adult men, girls are petite after all. Even sitting in front of him, his head was only against his chin, his delicate neck was exposed for a small time, and his skin was as white as snow, but between such barren mountains and mountains, it gave people a particularly fragile feeling. Jiang Sha suddenly felt as if something had knocked on him. There was a faint pain. For a moment, he wanted to take her into his arms regardless of it, but he didn't move as the horse's hooves stepped forward through the mud, but used his wide-sleeved robe to silently shield her from the oncoming cold wind.
星号
Tongzhou is only 50 miles away from the capital, and if there are good horses, it will be there in most of the hour. But now not all of these people have horses, and there are many fugitives with criminal records, who have not even changed their clean clothes, and do not dare to swagger into the city as fast as possible. The people of the heavenly sect had apparently taken this into account as well. On the way, they stopped outside a small village near the river. It was the middle of the day, the sun was drying up, dispelling a little chill, and the village was lined with thatched huts, and occasionally you could hear the barking of dogs from a few houses, and you could see the smoke rising from the cooking smoke outside. Huang Qian's whistle blew outside the village, and he didn't see how to move, and a few young men in rough clothes and rags walked out of the village. The two of them started talking over there. Jiang Xuaning took Jiang Sha's men and got off the horse, raised her eyes and saw this scene, seeing that everyone around her stopped to rest, or talking to others, or checking the situation around. She didn't notice their side, so she lowered her voice and asked, "Lord Jiang, what's going on?" She'd wanted to ask for a long time. It's just that most of the way is with everyone, and there is really no opportunity to communicate under everyone's noses. Even if she has doubts in her heart, she can't find a chance to ask. Jiang Shao knew that he was risking his life this time, and he also had the heart to explain the reason to her, but just as he was about to speak, he saw Feng Minjiao, the person sitting in the hall of the heavenly sect, with a smile on his wrinkled face, walking towards him. So I took back the words that came to my lips. He looked at Feng Minjiao. The people of the village here are credible, can they settle down? Feng Minjiao said with a smile, my heavenly sect members are all over the world, and there are brothers everywhere, and we have already arranged for our people to respond. These big evildoers who came out of the prison, if they don't change their clothes and disguise themselves, I'm afraid that they won't be able to enter the state city. After a while, you can also have some food here, rest for noon, and then set off. Zhang Sha nodded and said, very good. Fen Minjiao was concerned a few more words, and even asked Zhang Xuning about the situation before leaving. Everyone rested outside the village. The villagers actually brought out their own lunches, some of which were sumptuous, some of which were simpler, and they were like brothers in the face of the heavenly sect rebellion in the mouth of these imperial courts. They didn't eat anything last night, not to mention that most of them spent their days on prison food. I was happy at the moment. Zhang Xuning will also eat some of it. The villagers had also prepared some clean clothes, but apparently they didn't expect a girl to be there, so they turned around and called a woman from the village to bring her clean clothes. The others are all big men, and they are not used to being informal, and there are not a few who change their clothes on the spot. Zhang Cover's complexion is not very good looking. Zhang Xuning naturally couldn't be like them, so she just said to Zhang Sha, then found a nearby wood, and went deeper to change into her robe. It's just that she went for a long time and didn't come back. Zhang Sha's brow slowly furrowed. After waiting for a while, there was no one to see, so he said to Huang Qian and Fen Minjiao on the side, please wait a while, I'll take a look. Huang Qian and Fen Minjiao naturally didn't dare to say anything, who knows if there was an accident in a girl's house in this kind of wilderness. But they didn't dare to look at it. The person was brought by Zhang Sha, so naturally Zhang Sha should have seen it, and no one suspected anything. The woods in the mountains and wilderness are not particularly deep in this winter, but it is impossible to see what is going on inside under heavy cover. Zhang Sha was really worried. But when I walked into the depths, I didn't see anyone, and after a few steps, I saw that the light in front of me became brighter, and he had already passed through this forest directly, and then saw Zhang Xuning standing outside at the moment. Outside the woods was a river, and in winter there was no water source, and it lay peacefully on the sunken beach. The sun shone down from above, and the mist scattered through the trees. The surface of the water reflects the white sunlight, which in turn covers and flows down to the human body. She had changed into the clothes of the peasant woman, who had changed into the robe that belonged to him, resting on a large rock by the river. The light cyan fabric wrapped her body, and there was no style or color at all, which was really not worthy of this good-looking face. There are some women in the world who seem to be born in a rich country. But Zhang Xuning herself was very calm, and she didn't have any opinion on this dress, as if she had expected him to come over. She winked at him and smiled. Now is their time to talk, right? Zhang Sha was slightly stunned, and then understood. I also know that Zhang Xuning and a woman avoid everyone to change their clothes, and others have no relatives with her, so naturally it is not good to say what the situation is, so she can only let him come and find it alone. And he's going to be looking for it? It's just that he just cared about it, and he didn't expect to go to this lair. Zhang Xuning asked, why is Master Zhang here? Zhang Sha said briefly, the heavenly sect colluded with the king of Pingnan to rebel against the party and committed the holy taboo, and when the imperial court exterminated the heavenly sect, he killed a head of the heavenly sect named Gong Gai Cheng, and I knew some news inside the heavenly sect, so I made a plan to pretend to be a Dujinchen person whose identity is rarely known by the heavenly sect, and check the situation inside the heavenly sect, so as to eradicate it. I also knew about the prison robbery early on, but I didn't expect that the second girl Zhang was also there at that time. Of course, Zhang Xuning went to visit Yan Lin. She said in her heart that the matter of the Marquis of Yanji was not small, and she would be uneasy if Zhang Sha was involved, and Zhang Sha didn't ask, so she didn't explain, but just looked at him like this, looking like she wanted to get by. In fact, Zhang Shao had already thought about it last night. Who else could let Zhang Xuning risk sneaking into the prison in the middle of the night wearing a black cloak? It's probably still Yan Lin. Zhang Sha didn't pursue it, but said, if you disappear for no reason, Lord Zhang must be worried. And this road is really dangerous. Zhang should have let Zhang Er girl out of danger as soon as possible, but now the village here is also a place where the heavenly sect should be, and he doesn't dare to leave you here. The heavenly sect has an important rudder in Tongzhou, which is their largest stronghold in the north, and when they find its lair, they are afraid that there will be a fierce battle. The Yongding Pharmacy in Tongzhou City is the place where the imperial court responds, so I will ask the second girl to pretend to be sick at that time, so I can use this as an excuse to send the girl out of danger and return to the capital. Zhang Xuaning's heart sank when she heard this, but her eyes crossed the vast water and threw herself into the vast world outside, but a thought that had been circling all the way in her heart was born. Why do you want to go back to the capital? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity given to her. When she was reborn, everything she took the initiative or was forced to do was nothing more than to leave the capital and avoid the prison of her previous life. The four walls of the palace had become a nightmare for her. How many times did she dream back at midnight? She just wanted to be a bird she saw sitting under the leaky eaves when she was a child, flying over the ninefold palace, a nightmare in her previous life, and going to the rivers, lakes, and seas that Yu Fangyin had been to in the previous life and Yan Lin had talked about in this life, and she would be free. Now she has left the capital. If she doesn't go back and fly away, who will know her whereabouts? Although he didn't have much money on his body, he could go all the way to Shu first, and there were also Yu Fangyin and Ren salt farms, at least there was no need to worry about his livelihood. Where to go in the future, you can think about it later. She didn't want to go back. Not at all. She lowered her head and looked at the flat river beach in front of her, but she didn't know how to answer Zhang Sha's words, and her heart was a little stuffy, and it took a long time before she whispered, "But Lord Zhang, what if I don't want to go back?" Zhang Sha was stunned. Zhang Xuaning finally turned her head and looked straight at him, and said without shying away at all, "The days in the palace and the days in the capital are not happy, I don't want to go back." Whoever these words are placed on them is shocking to the world. Boudoir women, young lady, are outcast, how can they not want to go back, but are willing to wander outside? However, Zhang Sha was speechless. Her translucent gaze seemed to plunge headlong into his heart, making him feel like he was going crazy. Zhang Xuaning saw that he didn't speak, so he felt that she was not polite and behaved inherently, so he lowered his head and said, "I'm talking and playing, Lord Zhang dash. If you don't want to, don't go back." Before she finished speaking, Zhang Sha's voice came faintly. Zhang Xuaning raised her head in shock, "Lord Zhang." She looked at Zhang Sha's gaze, but Zhang Sha opened his eyes a little uncomfortably, and said, "No one in Tongzhou knows your identity, and after you get there, you will find an opportunity to hide, and go out of the city before the imperial court encircles and suppresses the heavenly sect, it is the same." Zhang Xuaning's astonishment suddenly turned into surprise. It was as if the clouds overhead had dispersed, and her mood was like the water on the river beach, suddenly clear and bright, and she was really indescribably happy. She almost jumped up and laughed, "Lord Zhang is so good. It's really that the originally frowning eyebrows and eyes are stretched, and a palm-sized little face is not powdered, but there is a more brilliant glow than before, taking advantage of the refracted rippling waves on the river surface, which makes people dizzy." Zhang Sha looked at the scene with almost cherishment. Whether in her previous life or in this life, she has rarely seen such a happy time. Zhang Xuaning was in a good mood, stepping on this river beach, but she saw a few stones that had become flat under the river water all the year round, and remembered something, so she turned her head and tugged at his sleeve, and blinked wisely, "Lord Zhang, do you believe that the stone will not sink immediately if I drop it? The stones are flat and relatively thin, and it might be more appropriate to call them stone chips." He saw it, but his eyes darkened slightly, and he did not speak. Zhang Xuaning only didn't believe it. After all, when he rose up to tease him like this in his previous life, he didn't believe it very much. She raised her hand and threw the thin stone out. It's a game she used to play with her friends as a child. The countryside is called playing water. The flat stone flew out from between the fingers, touched the surface of the water, and instantly made a pop sound, splashed some water, but did not sink immediately, but after touching the water surface, it flew forward again, and snapped on the water surface and floated twice before sinking into the river with all its strength. On the originally calm winter river, far and near, 3 ripples slowly bloomed. Heavy overlapping. Wrinkled with a lake full of sparkling. Jiang Xuning thought that she hadn't played for a long time, and she didn't want to dominate the countryside back then, and she felt that she was powerful. When he turned his head to look at Zhang Xia again, he snickered and stuffed the remaining 2 stones into his hand. Do you want to try it? The 2 stones landed in the palm of Zhang Xia's dry palm. There was still a little bit of mud and sand. He looked at it silently, picked it up gently, and paused as he raised his hand before throwing it out. Boom! The stone plunged into the river as if drunk. Jiang Xuning saw it, smiled secretly, and almost lost her breath. Although this Master Zhang is not from a good background, he can endure hardships, but he doesn't know anything about having fun, let alone this kind of game played by children in the countryside who don't learn and don't know how to play. In his last life, he couldn't teach him for half a day. Zhang Xia didn't really want to learn. I can't stand that she is the queen, so I want to see him laugh and use him to find happiness to relieve boredom. Even if Zhang Xia doesn't want to, he has to put on that not very good looking face and let her mess around. Now seeing this scene again after 2 lifetimes, Jiang Xuning is really indescribably satisfied, but looking at Zhang Xia lowering his head and looking at the remaining stone in his palm, he remembered that he didn't seem to be very interested in it in his previous life, and he was not happy, so he finally stuck out his tongue and restrained a little. Just as someone was shouting on the other side of the woods. It was probably because the 2 of them were gone, which made the heavenly sect people a little worried. Jiang Xuning shrugged her shoulders, knowing that coming out for too long would make them suspicious, so she said, I'll go back first, and I'll say that I'm on the other side, and I didn't see you. After saying that, he picked up the robe on the ground and walked back. Zhang Xia watched her figure enter the forest, gradually disappearing, and then slowly lowered his head and came back, looking at the stone in his palm. The distant mountains are covered with snow. The midday sun shines on the river. He stood for a long time among the rocks on the riverbank, with no undulation on his face, and his long, bony fingers took the flat stone, and threw it lightly towards the river, and the stone floated 3 or 4 times against the surface of the river, and then sank to the bottom. The ripples ripple and are stacked into lines. When the stone was held, it was heavy in his hand, but when it was thrown out, it felt empty. The river gradually calmed down. Zhang Xia looked at it for a while, then wiped off the mud in his palm little by little, turned around and walked back. Chapter 122, Abandoning the Surname. Jiang Xuning went back first. Others were surprised that she came back alone. Jiang Xuning made a surprised look as planned, and replied that she didn't see Zhang Xia. Xiao Dingfei pulled the core of the grass and put it in his mouth. He was bored. As soon as he heard this, he looked at Jiang Xuning meaningfully, and wrote clearly in his eyes, I don't know what to do, there are no 300 taels of silver here. But he pondered, these fools of the heavenly sect are stupid, so they shouldn't think much about it. Sure enough, these people really didn't think much of it. After a while, Zhang Xia came back, and when he asked, the 2 of them went in different directions, and no one suspected that they had spoken in private. Of course, even if it is suspicious, at most it is not ordinary with Xiao Ding, thinking about the brother and sister relationship between these 2 people, and wondering what they are doing. The group rested here and then set off for Tongzhou again. Jiang Xuning's mood is rarely good. The afternoon sun was shining, Even in winter, there was a little warmth, and the Tianjiao gang didn't know if they had any news. Compared to the morning, footsteps were a little nervous, quite a little unhurried, but it seemed that they were not in a hurry. She muttered quietly, "It's weird." When Zhang Sha heard it, he naturally whispered, "I'm waiting for a report from Tongzhou." Zhang Xuning couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Zhang Shao then answered again, "They don't fully trust my identity yet." Yes. Such a person came out for no reason, even if there are 80% of the believers, and the remaining 2 become stable, they still have to test it with the heavenly sect, so as to be foolproof. If you accidentally lure a wolf into the house, it will be out of control. As soon as Zhang Xuning thought of this, her brows locked, and she was inevitably a little worried. "It's just that I walked with everyone, and it was time to talk again. If you have any doubts, you can only keep them." Xiao Dingfei felt bored. When he set off from the broken temple in the morning, he invited Zhang Xuning to ride with him, but was ruthlessly refused, so he beat his horse and walked all the way. Until noon, I held back and didn't say hello to Zhang Xuning. However, at this moment, he was in front of the horse, but he couldn't help but look behind. This little girl is so good looking. When dressed plainly, in fact, at first glance it will not look as impressive as those heavy makeup, but the facial features and bones are placed there, and it looks better at a glance. Xiao Dingfei always knew that he was a layman who looked at faces. But occasionally he also hopes that he has a little backbone. However, when such an unidentified woman who was not even happy to deal with him appeared, he found that it was too difficult to keep the backbone or something. He finally tugged on the reins to let the horse go more slowly, and soon walked parallel to Zhang Sha and Zhang Xuning, with a smile on his face, as if Zhang Xuning's rejection of him in the morning had not happened, and said with concern, "I have to keep a low profile all the way, so I only have this dress for the girl, which is really a little neglectful of my Tianxiao. When I entered the city later, I would change the girl into a beautiful dress." Zhang Xuning had noticed him coming over a long time ago. Hearing the words at this moment, he only let his eyes fall on Xiao Dingfei's crotch, the snow-white horse. It is worthy of being the mount of the Xiao family who will toss the feet of the Xiao family in the future. It is really a rich and compelling. Under the horse's neck hung a red tassel, decorated with white jade pearls, and a golden bell. The horse's hooves moved, and the bell rang. It's a guy who knows where he's gone. Horses, like people, are dressed in such a way that they are called a riot. John covered his head and did not speak. He is not a person who can speak well, and he has nothing to say to Xiao Dingfei. The corners of Zhang Xuning's mouth tugged slightly, and said, "This is not a matter of worrying about the sun. But you and your horse are really low-key." Xiao Dingfei didn't know if he heard the ridicule in Zhang Xuning's words, but as if he had been praised, he kicked his nose and face, sat on the horse, and shook his body gracefully. After all, when you go out, you have something to do, and you can't be low-key if you don't want to be low-key. "Well, look at the 2 in front," he said in the direction of Feng Minjiao and Huang Qian in front of him. Zhang Xuning looked at the 2 people in front of her. Xiao Dingfei said, "Don't think that these 2 look like dogs. Secretly they are just sent by the sect leader to look at me. Alas, life must be full of joy. These people just don't know how to enjoy. Why bother doing such dirty work all day long? If people don't do some dirty work and tiring work, I'm afraid you won't have to enjoy it." Zhang Xuning couldn't help but scold. She smiled decently. Dingfei Gongzi said that he laughed. "Since you have such a high status in the heavenly sect, I think you have also had the diligence of smelling chickens dancing, hanging beams and stabbing stocks, lying on the salary and tasting gall, and the suffering of eating and drinking, which is really humble." Xiao Dingfei was at a loss. "What did you say? Do chickens have guts?" Zhang Xuning. It's because she forgot that this person doesn't know how to learn, and he can't understand such a crepe of words. The smile on her lips was faintly chapped for a moment, and she adjusted it in time, and said simply and clearly, I mean, you must be a person who has suffered hardships, so you can have today's status. Unexpectedly, Xiao Dingfei laughed a few times when he heard it, and waved his hand again and again, wrong, wrong. Zhang Xuning was stunned, wrong. Xiao Dingfei's flamboyant eyebrows and eyes were a little wicked and unbridled, the merry taste was crispy to the bones, and although it was a fancy thing to raise his hand at will, he also had a bit of a pointing attitude, and only said, I'm not hard-working. The girl is not in my teaching, but I don't know how difficult it is to get out of the church. 10 people are left behind, and one of them has to go to half of his life. In this world, some people are just lucky and reincarnated. For example, Ben Gongzi, I don't know which father and mother with horns gave a just right face. Eat with your face and eat with your face, how about it, is it good looking? As he spoke, he pointed to his own face. Long eyebrows and peach eyes, high eyebrow bones appear to be contoured, thin lips with a slight luster, the corners of the lips are always curved a little less tame. At first glance, it looks handsome and chic. But if you stare at the details of those facial features, it will faintly give people a little indescribable familiarity. If someone else comes to listen to it, I'm afraid that I won't be able to hear the depth of what I said. But Zhang Xuning is a person who came back from the previous life after all, and what comes to mind is the faces of Xiao Shu and his younger brother Xiao Ye, and even Xiao Yuan, the Duke of Dingguo. As for the rest, it is rumored to be very similar to the biological mother of Dingfei Shizi, that is, the younger sister of Yanji Ho Yan Miu. Eat with your face. Also rely on shameless eating. The meaning of this is profound. Xiao Dingfei just relied on no one to understand, telling the truth, and winked at Zhang Xuning at the end, I'm the son of destiny, I can enjoy happiness with me, don't you think about it? Zhang Xuning smiled faintly, there is no white pie in the world, if you give something, you will take it. The blessing of the child, others are only afraid that they can't afford it. If you give, you will take. Xiao Dingfei, who had been talking all the way before, suddenly quieted, and the expression on his face froze, and he didn't know what he thought, but there was a moment of gloom. After a while, he hummed unhappily, raised his chin and raised his arrogant posture, and finally sneered unceremoniously, you know a fart. Zhang Xuning didn't get angry, just looked at him with a smile. Xiao Dingfei somehow felt a little stunned, obviously he had only seen this girl for the first time, but the other party was neither seduced by him nor shy because of it, but he was calm and generous, not afraid of the appearance, just enough to pinch his pulse. Just this glance, it is a bit of a feeling of seeing people through. Reminds him of the one surnamed Xie. Back then, he was still a little beggar who asked for money outside the city god's temple, with no clothes and no food, and he was driven away in a sack in the winter, and fell to the ground and his knees and forehead were full of blood. When I looked up, I realized that I was in the way of a group of nobles. The people of this group are not necessarily very rich. The first person walking is a man in his 40s, stepping on a pair of foundation boots, wearing a navy blue Hangzhou silk round-necked robe, looking quite energetic, but the eyebrows are too calm. According to the words of the blind fortune teller in the city god temple, this is a sinister face, with a very hard personality, which is comparable to very human behavior, and when you meet the kind of person who absolutely wants to retreat and walk to avoid it. He was immediately startled, and saw that this person was followed by dozens of people, as if he was going in the direction of the city god temple, and hurriedly wanted to dodge. Unexpectedly, someone behind him suddenly told him to stop. He thought he was going to be unlucky, so he ran away without saying a word. Of course, he couldn't run far, but he was quickly caught and carried back to the gang, and immediately begged his grandfather to tell his grandmother and ask them to let him go. The middle-aged man at the head glanced behind him. The voice that had told him to stop said, "Wipe his face clean." Xiao Dingfei's face was wiped clean. At this time, he was pinched by his neck and forced to lift his face, so he finally saw the middle-aged man standing 3 steps in front of him. Juvenile. Or maybe it's somewhere between teenagers and young adults. Not very good to judge. Because he is taller than ordinary people, but also thinner than ordinary people, his eyebrows and eyes are cold, and there is a floating anger condensed on his face, and a little sickness is even more entangled in it. More than 10 years have passed, and Xiao Dingfei can't forget that look. It always made him think of the look in his back that sent chills down his back. He was so frightened that he couldn't move. Then I heard the middle-aged man call, "Dujun." It took a long time for the young man to retract his gaze, and then he said, "Father-in-law, he is the most suitable." What's appropriate? He didn't understand it at all. But what if you understand it later? It doesn't seem like much. From the beggar who begs on the street to the son who is clothed in fine clothes, it can be said that he has gone from the earth to the sky. He had already suffered too much and did not want to suffer more. The next person was born as a prince and general, and the title is hereditary. Why can't Lao Tzu be happy? Moreover, it is what the man does not want. And in the following 10 years, he is extremely glad that he made a right choice. Because the life of a person who loses this name is impossible for him to live no matter how he grits his teeth. Even if he was the beggar who was once from a humble background. Do you know what it means to you to give up your last name? Yes. Do you still want to give it up? My mother is gone, my father is unworthy, my name is humiliating, and I hate my surname. I don't want such a name and surname. Only thank God for mercy, the danger is insightful, although I dare not forget it, I am willing to give up the old surname, go to the old name, and abandon the old body. Isn't Tianhuang different from the common people? No matter what is going on, I will not change my mind. Isn't Tianhuang different from the common people? No matter what happens, I won't change my mind. Xiao Dingfei thought, for these 3 characters and surnames, that person is real, he hates and hates it very much, right? Somehow, he suddenly felt a little excited. Perhaps the pretty girl was right, and there were gains and losses to bear this name, but who told him to be born a beggar? There's no reason to care about any gains and losses. He just said, "You know a fart." Zhang Xuning didn't get angry. It's just because she knows that she has poked people in the sore spot. Xiao Dingfei didn't bother to talk to her, twisted his neck, turned his head, clamped the horse's belly, and only said play the piano to the cow, and then went forward again. Zhang Xuning lowered her voice and said to Zhang Sha behind her, "Does Lord Zhang think his name is familiar?" Of course, Zhang Sha knew, Ding is not the son of the world. Zhang Xuaning's heart pulled up the abacus, only to feel that this time was a great opportunity, such a superb scourge, if it could be arranged properly before she fled from Tongzhou, and sent back to the Xiao family, wouldn't it be beautiful? Thinking about it, she subconsciously turned around and wanted to discuss it with Zhang Sha. Unexpectedly, Zhang Sha saw that she didn't speak for a long time, and he was looking down at her. Riding on the same floor, even if Zhang Sha is a gentleman and Zhang Xuning is restrained, there is a fist distance between the two, but they will encounter it from time to time due to the bumps in the road, not to mention this twist and bow their heads. Suddenly, Zhang Sha's 2 dry lips brushed Zhang Xuaning's forehead and stopped at the corner of her forehead. At this moment, both of them stiffened. The girl's smooth and full forehead is like a piece of carefully polished jade. However, unlike the cold and rigid face, the man's lips are not hard, but because it is winter after all, and the wind is blowing all the time, so it looks slightly cold. Zhang Xuning felt as if she was being burned by a soldering iron. His heart stopped beating for a moment, and then he paced at a more violent speed, squeezing the blood all over his body, and his head went blank, completely forgetting what he was trying to say, and almost immediately retreated, saying I was rude, raised his hand to stroke his forehead, and quickly turned around, as if he was afraid of being seen something. Just turned his back to the person behind him, and a pair of snow-white earlobes were already red. Zhang She's hand was still holding the reins, and his body, which had been quite relaxed, tensed up again, and he sat stiffly on the horse, moving for a long time. Although Xiao Dingfei was gone, when he remembered the deflated rice he had eaten at Zhang Xuaning's side, he was still unwilling, so he couldn't help but look back. As a result, I saw the scene as soon as I turned around. I suddenly scolded in my heart, "Dog men and women are bold and corrupt in broad daylight," and a very unhappy and angry look appeared on his face, but he was a bad embryo, and he was aroused by the scene. Feng Minjiao and Huang Qian were talking about sending an outpost to Tongzhou to find out the news, and when they looked back and saw him coming immediately, they looked unhappy and couldn't help but be stunned. Xiao Dingfei said angrily, "When will I get to Tongzhou according to this broken leg?" Huang Qian frowned. Feng Minjiao knew that this was an ancestor and couldn't afford to provoke him, so he sighed and said, "I was about to send someone to find out the news of the rudder first. Gongzi is in such a hurry, is there something urgent?" Xiao Dingfei sneered, "Nonsense." Huang Qian smiled dryly and tried to say, "What do you have to do? Why don't you tell me and let the sentinel who went to take care of it for you first?" Xiao Dingfei glanced at him and sneered, "My son is in a hurry to go into the city to prostitute himself." Feng Minjiao, Huang Qian. "Mom, when is this all the time? Why didn't God send down the thunder and chop this grandson to death?"